Hello, this is Greg Elkan, and I welcome you to a special Elkan's Word for Today devotional. God bless you as you listen.
Welcome back, everybody. Today, we're going to be taking a deep dive into something I think we all deal with, and that's life's problems.
Yeah.
We all have problems.
Yeah.
And we're going to be looking at this devotional series, Wisdom for Life's Problems, by Greg Elkan.
That's right.
And we're going to see if we can glean some wisdom for our own problems. It's interesting because he starts out part one with something called divide by zero problems. What do you think about that when you first heard that?
Yeah, it sounds a little strange. You think math class or something like that, but it's actually a really good analogy for what he's talking about in this first part, which is that, even as Christians, we're going to encounter difficulties.
Yeah.
We're going to encounter problems.
Right.
This world is full of them.
Yeah, it's so easy to fall into that trap of thinking that once you become a Christian, all your problems are going to go away. But that's not really how it works, is it?
Yeah, no, it's not a magic wand.
Okay.
It doesn't suddenly just erase all the difficulties of life.
Yeah. Right. And he even says that, we still live in a fallen world, so problems are going to come up. But what I liked is that he doesn't leave us hanging there. He points to the Holy Spirit as our biggest advantage. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's such a key point because it's not about the problems magically disappearing. It's about having the resources to face them.
Right.
And the Holy Spirit provides those resources, that wisdom, that guidance, that strength.
Okay, so getting back to the divide by zero problems, can you explain that analogy a little bit more?
Yeah, so, in math, if you try to divide by zero, it's like an error. It's like you can't do it. It's meaningless.
Right.
And so he uses that as an illustration to say that there are certain problems in life that are just like that. No matter how much effort you pour into them, no matter how much you try to solve them, they're just not going to budge.
Oh, yeah. I can think of so many examples from my own life where I was just beating my head against the wall, trying to make something happen. And it's like, why am I even doing this?
Yeah.
So how do we even recognize those divide by zero problems?
Yeah, well, in part two, he gets into that a little bit more. And he talks about asking ourselves some really key questions like, is this problem actually within my control? Is this something I can actually do something about? Or is it something that's really outside of my control? And then he talks about, is the energy and the effort that I'm pouring into this, is it really worth it? Sometimes the wisest thing we can do is to acknowledge that a problem exists, but then choose to kind of redirect our focus and our energy.
That reminds me of that saying, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I feel like that really plays into this divide by zero idea.
Oh, absolutely. It's about being wise stewards of our time, our energy, and our emotions.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've identified these divide by zero problems.
Yeah.
Now what? Do we just sit back and just let life happen?
Well, not necessarily. This is where he introduces this really powerful concept, I think, in part three, and that's pivoting.
Oh, yeah. I like that.
Yeah. And, it's about recognizing when a situation calls for us to kind of change direction, maybe shift our approach a little bit, but without losing sight of the bigger picture.
I love that because it's not about giving up. It's about adapting. And he gives some really interesting biblical examples to illustrate this, right?
Yeah, he does. He talks about, the story of Joseph.
Yeah.
Who was sold into slavery by his brothers.
Right.
I mean, talk about a major curveball in life.
Yeah, for sure.
But instead of becoming bitter and defeated, he chose to focus on what he could control. He worked diligently. He made the most of his circumstances and ultimately rose to a position of incredible influence in Egypt.
And he didn't let that experience define him. I mean, he took what could have been a completely debilitating situation and turned it into an opportunity to grow and to ultimately fulfill his purpose.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And I think that's a key part of this whole pivoting concept. It's not just about changing direction. It's about doing it with a resilient mindset.
Right.
A willingness to adapt and a trust that God can work even through those really difficult situations.
And then you've got Daniel, who's taken captive to Babylon. And he finds himself in this completely foreign culture.
Yeah.
Facing all this pressure to conform. But instead of compromising his faith, he uses his skills and his wisdom to thrive. He ends up in a position of authority in the Babylonian government.
Both Joseph and Daniel are such great examples of what it means to pivot in the face of adversity. They didn't allow their circumstances to dictate their destiny.
Right.
They chose to lean into their faith and their strengths and ultimately God's guidance.
So inspiring.
Yeah, exactly. And that leads to the second principle, which is discerning the right direction to pivot in.
I love that because it's not just a reaction to a problem. It's like an opportunity to realign ourselves with our purpose.
I think that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
It's about embracing the journey, being open to those new possibilities, and trusting that God can use even those setbacks and those detours, to move us closer to where we're meant to be.
It's interesting because he actually points to Jesus as an example of pivoting.
He does, yeah.
You remember that example?
Yeah, he talks about the story where Jesus and his disciples are rejected by the Samaritans.
Right. Yeah.
And instead of, trying to force acceptance or, fight that battle, he just chooses to move on.
Yeah.
Doesn't waste time or energy on something that's not meant to be.
Such a powerful lesson.
Yeah.
So sometimes the wisest thing to do is just to acknowledge that divide by zero problem. Recognize we need to pivot and then redirect our energy towards something more fruitful.
Exactly. And that leads right into part 4, where he presents this really thought-provoking idea that those pivots, those redirects, might actually be God's way of moving us closer to our destiny.
That's a really interesting thought. It's kind of like when you're on a road trip and you have to take a detour. It might seem annoying at first, but sometimes those detours lead you to these amazing hidden gems that you would never have seen otherwise.
Right. It's like, you're not supposed to be on that road for some reason.
Yeah.
There's something else for you to see over here.
Yeah, exactly.
And he uses the story of Joseph to kind of illustrate this point. Remember, he goes through all those incredibly difficult experiences, being sold into slavery, falsely accused in prison.
Yeah.
But all of those pivots, all of those redirects, they ultimately led him to a position where he was able to save countless lives during the famine.
Yeah, it's so crazy to think about that, all those hardships that he went through, those moments that probably felt like the end of the world. They were actually crucial steps in fulfilling his destiny. If he had given up at any point along the way, things could have turned out so differently.
Absolutely. And that's the encouraging message here, I think, is that God can use even our most difficult experiences, our pivots, to shape us and to refine us and to move us closer to where he wants us to be.
Yeah, it reminds me of the story of the early Christians in the book of Acts. They were scattered by persecution, forced to flee from their homes and their communities.
Right.
But instead of letting that defeat them, they used it as an opportunity to spread the gospel even further.
I love that story because, instead of seeing that persecution as like a roadblock, they saw it as a launch pad, and God used that to really expand the reach of the early church. And it's such a great reminder that sometimes what we see as setbacks can actually be like these amazing catalysts for growth and for new opportunities.
So instead of dreading the next problem that comes our way, maybe we should start looking at it as a potential opportunity, like a divide by zero problem or a curveball. It could be a chance to grow or to redirect our lives or to discover our true purpose.
Yeah, it's such a powerful shift in perspective. Instead of asking, why is this happening to me? We can start asking, okay, God, where are you leading me through this? It's about embracing that journey and trusting in his plan and being open to the possibility that he might be using these pivots to move us towards something even greater than we can imagine.
This has been such a good deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much. It's not just about solving problems, but about approaching them with a totally different mindset.
Right.
Like with wisdom and with faith. And realizing that God can use even the most difficult situations for our good and for his glory.
It's like our lives are not defined by the problems we face, but by how we respond to them.
Yeah.
Are we going to let them defeat us, or are we going to embrace the opportunity to pivot and see where God might be leading us?
So as we wrap up today, I want to leave you with this thought. What problem are you facing right now that might actually be an opportunity in disguise? An opportunity for growth or for a change in direction. Maybe it's a job that you're not fulfilled in anymore, or a relationship that's become really strained, or a personal challenge that just feels really overwhelming. Whatever it is, remember what we've learned from Greg Elkan's teaching. Seek God's guidance through prayer. Discern the right course of action. And don't be afraid to embrace the possibility of a pivot. You never know what incredible opportunities might be waiting for you just around the bend. So thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, keep seeking wisdom, keep pivoting, and keep trusting in God's plan for your life.
This was an audio recording of Elkan's Word for Today, the WhatsApp devotional by Greg Elkan. For more information and other edifying resources, visit us at www.gregelkan.com. That's GREGELKAN.com. You can send your comments or questions by WhatsApp to 234-813-664-2912. God bless you.